So Vanessa, we had the Prime Minister at the beginning of the week tell us that she wants to be carbon neutral, she wants New Zealand to be a leader in environmental conservation. And yet, you know, behind us here we have Marsden B, which is going to be a proposed coal-fired power station. How does Greenpeace view that?
Oh, well, look, this has got to be just the first step from the Prime Minister and really from any political party that's serious about tackling climate change. We've got to stop Marsden B, and from then on we've got to see no new coal-fired power stations in New Zealand.
And what happens if they go ahead with it? I mean, if they simply don't listen to us? I mean, climate impact globally, and what about the residents who live around here? How is that going to help?
Oh, well, Marsden B is going to have a huge impact, not just on climate change globally, but also on the local community and the toxic legacy that it's going to leave for these people for decades afterwards. So it's both a global and a local issue for these guys.
If we're talking, you know, climate change and sea rise, how smart is it to put a whole bunch of waste near the beach where, if we have the kind of tidal surge that we could expect from climate change, won't that pollution simply wash out into the sea?
Well, yeah, the toxic waste in terms of the ash from this proposed power station would be really risky for the local community and also for the local environment here.
Yeah.
It's all going to be stuck in a pool, a leach-shaped pool, but there's no guarantee that that even the liner but underneath that pool, that toxic pool, isn't going to break. And then, as you say, with sea level rise and changing environmental conditions, what that is going to mean in terms of outflow of pollution into Bream Bay.
So when we look at the fact that the CO2 that this little sucker is going to produce is equivalent to 500,000 cars, how can we take Helen Clark seriously when she says she wants to be carbon neutral?
Well, right now we can't. I mean, we've got some very good words on the table, some great aspirations about being truly sustainable, about being bold on climate change. But now the real test is going to be to see how that translates into action. Now, at the moment, unfortunately, all the major political parties are failing on the key policy tests. No one's talking targets. No one's talking about policies to really encourage renewable energy uptake, and no one's getting serious on taking the action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions urgently. The Stern report of this week has really brought out the last key piece in the jigsaw puzzle, which is the economics, and now that's just irrefutable. The fact that it's going to cost trillions of dollars in damage if we don't act on climate change, whereas we do have a window of opportunity to step in and only a price tag in the billions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and avoid really dangerous levels of climate change impacts.
And let's talk about the skeptics, because this is something I always love. You do this because you have a genuine concern about the environment. A lot of the skeptics do it because they seem to be paid for by ExxonMobil. You're not going to make billions of dollars out of this, are you?
Well, no, Greenpeace and the environmental movement isn't about making money off this. I mean, this is the most serious threat that faces the planet today, and we and millions of people around the globe want to see a solution to this. And that's what this Global Day of Action has really been about people getting out on the street and taking action, calling for urgent reductions in greenhouse pollution.
And let's be quite clear, the science is irrefutable, isn't it?
Oh, look, the debate has been closed on the science for a long time. Mainstream scientific community is in agreement. What we're seeing is marginalised fringe scientists who are still cultivating this sense of a debate when in fact there isn't one.
Yeah. We
need to act. The case now is just about how we do that, how quickly we can do that.
How much of the fault should the mainstream media take for this creation that there's still a debate somehow?
Well, look, I think that the media really needs to start focusing on the next round now, the next round of discussion about how we're going to move forward, what are we going to do, how quickly can we get those greenhouse gas emissions down so that we can avoid really dangerous levels of climate change. That's what the debate needs to focus on now. And
we're not talking about our grandchildren's future, are we? We're talking about our future now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we're already beginning to see impacts of climate change around the world, and all of the signals from the scientific community is that's just going to get worse in our lifetime and in the lifetime of our children's and our children's children unless we take action now.
Let's talk about the argument that you're going to have people throw at you. Well, why the hell should we do something if China and India aren't going to do anything, and they're polluting more and more, so why should we bother? It's going to be, it's not going to be good for our business. How would you respond to that?
Well, it is a global problem and it needs a global solution. But look, if we start to look at the numbers, let's face it, New Zealand is one of the worst polluters on a per capita basis.
Right.
Much, much worse than India or China of the world. We're a wealthy country, and if a wealthy polluting country like New Zealand can't take action, then what grounds have we got to ask other poorer countries to start to cut their emissions first?
I've always found a certain hypocrisy in Australia's stance, who will say, well, we're not going to do anything until China starts to cut back, yet Australia exports most of its coal to China. And the reason why they don't want China to cut back is they're not going to buy as much coal off the Australians. I mean, that sort of vested interest by some of these industries, that really has to be examined, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear a lot of this, well, we're not going to do anything until our major trading partners do something. And in terms of New Zealand, they're hoping that they want to stay in line with what Australia is doing or the US is doing, which at a federal level is not much. But they don't want to stay in line with our other major trading partner like the EU, who's really leading this and pushing for strong reductions and have got targets to reduce emissions.
And the thing that kills me is that there are better solutions, aren't there? I mean, there are better solutions than this thing here. There is wind.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't need Marsden B. We don't need more coal-fired power stations here. We need to move towards renewable energy. We need to get smarter with how we use our electricity and be more efficient and use conservation measures. And we also need to start to generate our electricity closer to where it needs to be used.
I mean, and the economics are no longer there, are they? I mean, if you look at Solid Energy, who's primarily a coal provider, they returned $20 million last year to the government. Meridian, which is much more renewable, they returned $1.1 billion. I mean, the economics are no longer in favour of fossil fuels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wind is the fastest growing energy sector in the world and is in fact the second fastest growing business in the world, second only to mobile phones. So we're talking about very real, credible industries which are just booming, and it's just a matter of New Zealand turning its focus and picking up renewable energy solutions instead of sinking ourselves into greater problems by pushing through projects like Marsden B.
And for some people who are watching this, they're going to feel, what the hell can one person do? What can I do? Joining Greenpeace is certainly a start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about government action. It's also about personal action. Part of that is that our governments need to hear that people want strong action on this, that they don't want Marsden B, that they do want emission reductions. And so it's about getting that voice out there. So people can write to their MP, they can sign on to our open letter to the New Zealand government. They can take steps at home by changing their electricity company to one that uses renewable energy. Look at how they're travelling, switch to bike or walking or carpooling, public transport. All of these sorts of things. Everyone needs to be part of this solution. And
I suppose that really is you're right. That is the solution. It's a re-education process, isn't it? Because the way that we've been living is unsustainable.
Yeah, look, we need to have a rethink about how we do a lot of things, and particularly we need to put in some pretty fundamental changes to the way we use and generate electricity, and that has got to start now. Scientists are telling us we've got about 10 years to act to avoid really very catastrophic levels of climate change. So the time for talking is over. The time for acting is now.
And let's just be quite clear on that. Finally, when we talk catastrophic, it's not just about it's going to rain a little bit more or it might be a little bit warmer today. We're talking it will be catastrophic events for the entire planet, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, some of the climate change predictions are very, very serious. We're talking about mass extinctions, we're talking about water shortages, food shortages, the creation of millions of refugees whose homes are no longer inhabitable. We're talking about massive economic impacts, in the order of $30 trillion if we fail to act.
Yeah, so the need to act is now.
Yes, the need to act is absolutely now. It is very urgent. We've got about 10 years to turn this around.
So wake up.